94 Rocks, Jay-Z here, and I'm hanging out with Jamie from the band Earthside. And Earthside is a brand new band that we're spinning here on 94 Rocks. And I wanted to talk with Jamie a little bit more. He's the guitarist from the band. And first of all, Jamie, thanks so much for joining me on the show. And I guess before we get into everything here, I want to kind of know a little bit about the history of the band Earthside and how this all came about. So if you could give us some of those details, that'd be great.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me, Jay-Z. So we're I guess we're brand new to radio, but we're not a brand new band in the sense that, we're often marketed in the progressive music space. We have songs that average about 8 to 10 minutes. So we finally got one that's in the 3 minute range and figured we'd send it y'all's way. But we've been playing together for a long time. Some of us grew up together in high school and played in other bands, and but Earthside really came to be as we are. We released our debut album in 2015, an album called The Dream and Static. And that album was, we're an instrumental band, but half our songs have guest vocalists. And one notable collaboration on that album was with LeJean Witherspoon from Seven Dust on a 10-minute song with orchestra. So a little different from typical Seven Dust fare. Also on that album, we worked with the singer from Soilwork and the singer from Tesseract, a bit more in the metal world, but I think at least Soilwork maybe had a couple songs go to rock radio at one point. And then we took 8 years between albums because we thought, oh, well, we got Seven Dust singer on our first record. Imagine, that was when we were nobody. Now at least we're a little bit of somebody. Maybe we can get vocalists more easily now. And it proved to be very challenging, especially when the pandemic hit and people's plans were very uprooted. So we took 8 years between records and then finally resurfaced in 2023. And now this song that you guys are about to play, Earthsync, is resurfacing. The deluxe edition. It's from the deluxe edition of that album, and that song. There was a 12-minute song on that album called "Watching the Earth Sink" that's instrumental, and then kind of like Linkin Park Reanimation, I sort of took little bits of the track and reimagined it. And for your listeners, I know they've possibly heard Kristen from Daedric several months ago, and so she actually on her own kind of played around with adding a vocal bit to our instrumental song "Watching the Earth Sink" in one section. She even hopped up on stage and played just that part live with us when we came through Dallas almost 2 years ago at this point. And then ever since then, I was like, it'd be cool if we just built a whole new song around that. And so that's how this collab came to be. And that hopefully brings you mostly up to speed.
Yeah, absolutely. You were kind of saying, and of course, when before we started the interview, I kind of said, well, you guys are just instrumental and maybe some background vocals. And you guys kind of compared yourself to like Apocalyptica, which is a band that probably a lot of people know and had brought in a lot of singers, male or female. And that's kind of what you guys have done from the get-go. That's what, is that exactly kind of how it is?
Yeah, I think they set a template for us when they were, I guess it was almost 20 years ago at this point when they had like Corey Taylor and Adam Gontier and Till Lindemann from Rammstein, etc., on some songs. And at that time, this was before we even were Earthside, but we always struggled to find a singer that would be like a permanent singer for us that was up to, we were very picky about what we wanted in a vocalist, how we wanted the emotions to feel, what their range was, and just our imagination of what our songs would sound like with vocals wasn't quite manifesting with the singers we were auditioning in our area. It wasn't just quite a fit. And so, if we couldn't kind of find the right singer for us, it started off just like, well, I guess we can borrow other people's singers for a little bit. And we also just, amidst struggling to find a singer, I think it helped us cultivate some of the things that are more interesting about our sound. It's like, okay, well, we can't lean on vocals to be compelling if we don't have a singer. So I think it pushed us to be more challenging and engaging, instrumentally in our composition. And so now at this point, I think we really like composing instrumental pieces. I don't know if we want to lose that. So having the flexibility to sometimes express ourselves and have messages we want to share with people that through words and through a human voice as the main instrument conveying that, I think giving us that flexibility is the ultimate in creative freedom.
Very cool. Have you ever guys thought about maybe, since your background vocals, ever maybe doing a song with your vocals and not having that collaboration part?
Well, the demo versions of these songs exist with us singing on them. Not all of them, because sometimes the singer writes the vocals, but like our collab with Daedric, she wrote almost all the vocals on that. Um, so other than me just sending like one or two line ideas to her that are like 10-second snippets, there's nothing with my voice on it for that. But yeah, I've had that idea. I don't know if my bandmates are for that idea, but um, yeah, our drummer I think is a sneaky good vocalist. Unfortunately, live that's probably the hardest instrument to perform, especially because his drumming is insane. So he's he's all over the kit. It's not like a simple groove, and he can just get a headset mic and sing. He's using his full aerobic, capacity for just the drumming part. So singing live would be pretty challenging. But yeah, I think it would be cool, especially for the fans who follow us most closely. When somebody's really into a band, I think they can enjoy kind of getting to know them on that deeper level, even if it's not necessarily the band's forte. Like if your favorite band has their bassist or guitarist sing on one song, it's just like a cool tidbit that that person actually kind of sneakily can sing. It may not be the band's main thing, but it can deepen the connection for the fans to hear that. So it's something that's loosely on my radar as a possibility, but not the focus at the moment.
Give us a little bit of the background of the name. I know it's probably been brought up by other interviews and that, but for us, we're new to Earthside. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so I mean, like the four of us, or three out of the four of us, were playing together in a band that had a different name, and we didn't like the name to the point where I'm debating whether to even say it in this interview. But what the heck? We were called in high school and college. We were called Bushwhack, and it didn't really fit. We weren't very backwoods bushwhacking. So we were pretty eager to change the name, and one of the things we wanted was a name that our music could kind of speak for itself as far as setting the tone forward. I think Earthside is neutral enough that the music gets to kind of decide what the name feels like and means. I think within the band, we each sort of have a different interpretation of what Earthside means. For me, I like to think of it as sort of not being on the earth, but sort of among the earth, kind of like instead of being riverside along the river, you're almost like in the atmosphere with an earthside view, and you're sort of reaching for the stars and kind of amidst the cosmos in some way, but you're also grounded in the earth and keeping you humble in that respect. So for me, that's the meaning I find in it. And if you ask any of my bandmates, they'll give you a totally different answer.
Well, that's typical. Everybody's got a different interpretation of band names, the music, the lyrics, everything. Everything is interpreted. That's the beauty of music, because you might have intended to write something one way, but the listener might think it's totally opposite or does something different.
And yeah, whether it's internal in the band or just how, as you said, somebody else receives it or interprets it. We've had people tell us what they think the name means, and it's something we've never come up with, and we're like, oh, maybe we'll use that in an interview. No. But yeah, I think that is, and I think that's one of the advantages also of being instrumental in some cases is then there's really opportunity for interpretation or how people feel the music, because you're using a language that can kind of fit between the cracks of emotions, these little subtle nuances that we don't have words for, and that makes people feel things that our language can't quite access.
So I got to ask, you'd said in the interview, a lot of your songs, long length, 8, 10, 12 minutes. Why did you decide to get into the radio side of things in the radio world? Because 8, 10, 12 minute songs, unless it's maybe Tool or something, it don't get normally played very much on rock radio. So how did you guys decide to take the jump into that? And then obviously to still stay true to your roots, because obviously you've played a lot of stuff that's instrumental in a long time.
So, I mean, it's a little bit surprising that I go into this more proggy band while being a total radio nerd. But one of my favorite bands growing up was Seven Dust, and we were fortunate enough to do a albeit 10-minute not radio song with Lejean from Seven Dust with a whole orchestra from Moscow. This was back 10 years ago at this point. But yeah, I've been a whole rock radio nerd. Where we grew up in Connecticut, we used to have an active rock station, WCCC. They folded in the last decade or so, but I followed the charts pretty religiously. So I used to have a dream of like being in a band that was consistently played on the radio. But while I was formulating that dream, my bandmates and I were also just creating music that didn't quite fit that paradigm. I think part of it is, in the 90s and 2000s, especially in the 90s, it was a bit more common for longer songs, even from bands before they became such established forces at radio. I know in today's day and age people have shorter attention spans, but I believe in the I think people, it's like if you build it they will come. I do think if people are exposed to slightly more challenging music, no matter what the context, I think there still will be some positive reception to it. And in this case the song was 3.5 minutes, so it's kind of a gateway drug to Earthside, as it were, to hook you into some of the more challenging stuff we do. And yeah, I think some of it's just that it's a lifelong dream. I mean, we're not giving this the biggest radio push ever, because we know this is just kind of testing the waters and introducing ourselves to this world. But some of my favorite bands who are not necessarily radio bands, but are more on the progressive side, I discovered them by listening to my local rock station, like a band like Porcupine Tree, which I don't know if your listeners, maybe a handful of them will know, but they're one of the bigger prog rock bands the last 20 years. They had a song at rock radio 20 years ago that was how I discovered it. And around that time, my favorite band nowadays is a band called Carnival.
Yeah.
They had a song at rock radio. I don't know if Fair to Midland would be considered a progressive rock band, but they have proggy elements and just certainly willing to take risks. And so, I think if radio is never has more adventurous music pushed to it, then radio doesn't necessarily have the same opportunity to play it. And I think it can, it's a chicken or the egg thing. So take the music to radio and see what happens. If listeners react to it, if the people, the programmers and music directors at these stations are into it or willing to give it a shot, then we can find out. We can get that feedback. And sometimes people just enjoy hearing something. Maybe it doesn't become their favorite thing, but it's nice to have something that's a little different from the other songs they're hearing, just to kind of keep the listening fresh.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, I think the listeners are yearning for it. The problem is it's the programmers that they have a mindset that I only can play so much of a time of a song. And a lot of that, unfortunately, has to do with the programming of a radio station, because all of a sudden, if your format is to play so many songs in an hour and you've got a one long song, it takes away from maybe a multiples of songs that should have been played in that time. So that's where the challenge becomes a little bit. But then obviously there's specialty shows too, where that can be filled in on rock radio. So that's kind of what we have here. Of course, your song now that you have spinning on our airwaves, Earthsync, is not a song that is worried about the length of time. So, and that's probably going to be very, I guess, the lack of better words I'm trying to find here, exciting for a programmer to maybe giving a chance to play it.
It gives more flexibility. I guess
Yes.
gone are the days where a long song is viewed as a positive because they have a longer bathroom break. But I mean,
Yes. American Pie was that one. We all know that, Don McLean, if you needed to use the restroom for a few minutes in rock radio or in radio in general, just put that on. You're good to go.
I think Stairway to Heaven would help,
That too.
clear some. But I'm not going to get too graphic on it. But
No, we don't have to do that. Let's talk